a sense of community when you're free. Rolling through the mountains, rolling through the valley, rolling through paradise with me. Hello, everyone. Well, it's always fun for me when I get to interview a relative or a family member. So I'm really pleased to have back on my show my son, Andrew Scott Brown. Hi, Andrew.
Hi. How's everyone? How are you?
I just want to remind everybody that you're in Shanghai, right?
Yes, and it's early. Well, not early anymore, but morning for me. I guess night for you.
Yeah, late or early evening, I guess you would say. I don't know. This is not quite night, I suppose. It's in between time.
Right.
One of the things I was just thinking about is how long you've been in China now?
I moved to China in November of 2003. So quite a while.
20 years, Andrew.
Yeah, almost. Yeah, it'll be 20 years.
Yeah, that's a long time. So, and again, I'm just reminding the audience that when Andrew went to China originally, it was to teach English as a second language, and a lot of his life has changed since then. He became a businessman, and he's married, and all those all those wonderful things. But what we're going to talk about today is something that Andrew has always had in his life in some form or other, and that's music, right?
That's right.
So you have, what do they call these, synthesizers?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So, I was growing up, I learned organ, right, music for a long time.
Yeah.
And so that made me a keyboard player, and I guess technically an electronic keyboard player, because most, in the 80s when I was learning organs, I don't think where we lived there were the pipe organs that were driven by wind pumps. So most organs were electronic based. And then I got into synthesizers. Of course, an organ is not I still love organ. It's my favorite instrument. But they're not a very portable machine. Some of them they're furniture sized, basically.
Yes.
You can't bring them in. So I got into synthesizers as a teenager, and that's just something I've always done. They're portable. You can get your basic organ and piano and what kind of sounds on them, and of course, it's a keyboard interface. But of course, they can do a lot more, that's part of the big appeal to them.
Right. Now, do they come in all different sizes? These synthesizers?
Yeah, they do. Actually, let me grab. I won't have power, but let me show you one thing.
Okay.
So somebody gave me this recently. Yeah, I don't think I can plug it in, but this is a small electronic, what's called a theremin. So it's debatable what the first electronic instrument actually was, because there were kinds of electronic instruments built in the 18th century, of course, when people first started using electricity. But one of the first major electronic instruments was this thing called a theremin. So a theremin is a synthesizer. It's got these two antennas, and it makes a sound. And the way that you play it is you move your hand, and the closer you go, the higher the pitch goes.
Oh.
And then you can also control the volume and a kind of filter, right? So anyway, somebody gave this to me a couple of weeks ago, and this is a small electronic theremin. You plug it in, it's got USB power, and it makes not the nicest sound in the world, but it's a fun little thing to do. So you can get little things like this, and large, full size, like 88 key.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, you had these like big, long ones.
Yeah, I played. The largest size that they make is 88 keys, which is the same as a piano.
Right.
And when they make a keyboard synthesizer, because not all like this one that doesn't have a keyboard, right? Not all synths have keyboards. When they make keyboards, the style of keys is very important. So if you're a piano player by training, or if you prefer pianos, they make the weighted keys. Like a piano key has weight to it. What pianos did, or why the piano was an important music invention, was that it allowed you to have expression in how hard you hit the key. So like an organ, doesn't matter how hard you hit the key, it makes the same volume. Piano, the harder you hit. So they do make those with synthesizers. I don't like weighted keys. I'm an organ player. So I like I
Yeah,
like
yeah.
what are called waterfall styles. So there's all kinds. They have mini keys and big keys, and most of my full size synths are 61 keys, which is about the size of an organ manual. When you see an organ and they have stacked keyboards, those are called manuals. So I like that's what I like. That's the size I like because it's what I'm used to and I prefer.
Now, so can you get, yeah, you don't have anything there that's plugged in that you could give a demonstration of what kind of sounds you get from these synthesizers?
Well, I think before we get into that,
Okay.
yeah, I do have some stuff plugged in. It's complicated. So I've moved recently. I've in the last I would say 3 or 4 years, I've moved onto a different style of synthesizer.
Okay.
So I think, you know, everybody probably knows what everyone listening probably knows what a synthesizer looks like. They have little, it's usually has a keyboard and it's, you know, it's a box and it's got some buttons on it and does different things. And I've got those and those are great. And maybe I can switch my camera here to show you. I'm gonna move it around by hand. Did my camera change or no? No.
No,
Oh, here.
it's like, oh, there you go. Yeah, it's like you were frozen for a minute.
Right. Oh, well, nothing's.
Things don't, you know, this is what happens when you do interviews.
Yeah.
Things don't always work that right, like the way you want them to at the time. But I'm just kind of curious, you know, because you can make these really awesome sounds with them, right? Musical sounds. Oh,
Sorry.
that's okay.
Oh, I know how to change it. So let me change to.
This is kind of fun.
There.
Okay.
Okay. That's not well, that's something, but I will. That's not what I want to talk about. So you know, of course, there's it's a bit wobbly. I'm going to move this by hand. So, you know, this is a keyboard.
Right.
I use this as a controller. So I use this for performances. But you can see a lot of wires.
Yeah.
A lot of wires. My life is largely wires. So I've moved on to something that's called modular synthesizers, which look like this.
Okay.
So you can see there's all these small modules, small like little boxes, right? So the reason there's a lot of reasons I moved into this because it's a very eclectic and somewhat expensive hobby. But when you have a synthesizer, you know, if you want new sounds, I got to a point where I didn't want any more keyboards. I don't, you know, I have this keyboard. I don't need another keyboard because I have one already. Right. So then what modular synthesizers allow you to do is just buy the small functions, little things that synthesizers do so you can expand the sounds. You end up building, what you end up doing is building a customized instrument made up of small modules. So it's a synthesizer, but it's a synthesizer where you've put it together yourself in different pieces.
Okay.
Does that, if that makes sense?
Yeah. A hell of a lot of wires there.
Yeah, it's a lot of, well, because they're all separate modules, you've got to connect it together, you know, every time.
So you have to figure out, like, when you're connecting them, like you have to test to see if that's the sound you want, or is that how it works?
Yeah, I'm actually hoping to show you really quickly if I can do this fairly simply, so that you know, so that people can sort of see how it works.
Yeah.
So let's start with a sound. So synthesizers grab some wire, put some wires here. Probably not long enough. What synthesis is about is it uses in analog synthesizers. There's a circuit, an electronic circuit that makes a waveform, and there's a few basic waveforms. So I'm hoping you can hear this. Plug this in. And I'm hoping you can see it as well. Actually, is the kind of main thing. Can you hear anything?
No.
No.
No. Can't hear it. Nothing yet. So I'm just pretty curious why you're trying to get some sound there for other people who use these kind of instruments or whatever. Like my son seems to get to know what's inside or what compromises the different elements of it or whatever like that. You know, like the inner workings almost. I'm just wondering if a lot of people do that, or if it's that just certain people that do that type of thing. Yeah. Some people just may be happy to get that and then just, you know, make their sounds and be cool about it. But you always go that step further.
Sorry, go ahead.
You always go a step further, you know, like I said, with getting to know how it works and why it works the way it works and that sort of thing.
Well, there is something I'm into. So I mean, synthesizers is
You're quieter now. Can you turn your sound up?
Synthesizers are of course I think they're a mainstream instrument now.
Turn up your sound. You're too quiet, Andrew. Something happened to your sound. See, no, if I was good at editing, none of this wouldn't matter. I'd edit it all out and connect it all, and we'd have a really nice. What's the word I want? Really.
No. I'm sorry if this is going to be all in the final.
I can hear you now, nice and clear.
Okay. The synthesizers I think are a fairly mainstream instrument these days. You know, everybody uses them. Everybody's kind of familiar with them. And then within synthesizers, these modular synthesizers that I use it's a pretty small community. But then within that community, there is this DIY world. There's this world of people that design and build their own instruments. Then I'm also into that as well. So I mean, I can show you pretty easily.
I'm not surprised.
So this here is a small module.
Okay.
So I've only just recently started designing my own, and it's a bit of a long process because I don't actually know very much about electronics. But the way people tend to get into this is you start by buying a kit. You can buy it just in pieces, and you solder it, you put it together yourself, and then from there you can just buy instead of buying a kit contains all the parts that you need. And then later you can buy just sort of the circuit boards and then find all the parts yourself. Okay. And then this one comes from, it's an open source module. Somebody designed this and they put the plans for building it up on a website called GitHub, and you can download it and then have it manufactured, make whatever changes you want to have it manufactured. And, it can save money. I mean, living in China, of course, buying electronic components is easy and cheap. But I think, I do it mainly because I just really enjoy it. I really enjoy doing it. And the community of people that do it is quite small, but quite interesting. People do all kinds of crazy things. So most of, I don't buy commercial synthesizers or modules anymore. I buy some DIY stuff, but then this year in particular, everything I'm doing is in the open source world, which is, so if anyone's not familiar, what open source means is that people, when they build something or they design something, and they make the code and the plans all available for free, so anybody can use it. And it's, I don't have a problem with commercial businesses. I think it's, the world we live is fine. But there's something nice about the openness and sharing of the open source world. And there are a couple businesses within the modular synthesizer world. Well, one business anyway, that they ran the owner ran her company as an open source company. So every time she designed something and released it, it was also open source. And she was able to be commercially successful, while at the same time people would build clones or modifications of her existing design. So it is compatible with commercial business at the same time. If anything, it is. It is a kind of nice thing. No. And it's just kind of it's part of I think in synthesizers is quite a big world, because of course that involves all the stuff people think of with, you know, club music, like, you know, electronic dance music and whatnot, which is its own world and all that. But in within people that use hardware or synthesizers for performances, the it's not it's difficult to do a full performance by yourself live with just synthesizers. So it's not a big world that does it, but it's just, it's a very nice and very nice and kind of open community.
Yeah.
So when I perform during the year, and
I'm just going to say that though, before you get to when you how did you find this? How did you get the connection to that little community that does that?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. So I used to perform in Toronto when I lived in Toronto a little bit, and of course, I moved to China and I didn't perform for a very long time. And I actually didn't. I lived in small cities for a while before moving to Shanghai, so I wasn't really in touch with the music world or people doing synthesizers and whatnot. And then I started getting into this stuff, and it's hard to buy things in China. It's there's a lot of import restrictions, and it's just very whatever, not fun if you're trying to buy stuff from overseas. And I ended up discovering this. There's a very popular app here that's for people selling secondhand products, secondhand stuff, used stuff, right? And it's really great. And I found that there's a lot of people selling secondhand modules, secondhand synthesizer modules on there. And I bought one from a guy. We had just gone into lockdown in 2020, and you know, after the initial horrible period was over, where nobody could do anything, people were still locked down, but they were allowing deliveries, so the delivery drivers worked. So I ordered. You just couldn't leave your community, your little compound. So I ordered a module from this guy because there was nothing else to do, and everybody at that time, everybody was buying like crazy, you know, but just buying and selling all the time. And he invited me into a chat group. So on the main instant messaging platform in China, which is called WeChat, he invited me into this chat group, and it's, you know, there's like 500 people that are all. It's a chat group for talking about synthesizers.
Oh.
And I was there for a while, and you know, I started wanting to, because I was getting better at using this particular equipment, and I started wanting to. Performance wasn't in my mind, but I wanted to jam, meet other people to play with them.
Yeah.
And so I met there were a couple other people in Shanghai from there, and so we started meeting up and playing. And then a few months later, somebody, once, you know, we were kind of opened up again, we could travel between cities.
Yeah.
Somebody in another city said, "Oh, I want to do a small modular event. Anybody who wants to perform is welcome to go." And I said, "Yeah, sure, I'll go." So I went and did. First performance was terrible. Not terrible, but it wasn't. I thought it was a jam, so I didn't write anything. I thought we were going to go and like just sort of make music together. Okay. And I showed up, and it was at a bar with this big stage, and everybody else had prepared like these, you know, full sets. And I was like, you know, and then it was still fun. Everybody's really nice. You know, you at these kind of modular events, people are very open. You can show up and do anything you want. They don't really care what you're performing. And it's everybody there is not everybody, but many of the people there they're musicians, and they're also pretty technical. So, you know, they're interested in the equipment and the technique of your performance as well as what you perform, which is different from performing in a nightclub where the audience, they don't care. They're there to dance. They just want to.
That's right.
They don't understand what we're doing. They don't care. They just, you know, they want to enjoy it. So I did the first performance that was terrible, and then a second performance that was also a couple of months later at another city that was also terrible. And at that point, I was not feeling great about it because I had two bad shows. And then there was a very big event, for at least in terms of this stuff, in Beijing. So there's an event that takes place regularly called the Beijing Modular Commune. Right. And people that are into this stuff from all over China go. And I worked very, very hard, and I spent a lot of time practicing and writing, and it went amazing. I did a great show, and it just, that felt so good. You know, the people loved it, and it was what I think what I did was a bit unique. It stood out a little bit from what other people were doing. There were many great performances, not just me, but
Yeah.
I had my own unique space within that space of great music. And it was such a good feeling that like now I would accept 1,000 failures, like 1,000 terrible shows, just for that one time of feeling that good, that one like
Yep.
performance. But luckily, most of my shows don't go that badly. So yeah.
Well, I know you posted like little bits of some of the events that you performed at, right? But like you said, you now get paid to do it.
Yeah, I mean, not a lot, but yeah,
But that's pretty cool, though, right?
yeah, it's the kind of principle of it is nice. You know, sometimes uh they pay your flight, you know, because it's often outside, it's often in other cities, so they pay for your transportation
Oh, that's
accommodations.
nice.
And
Yeah, that's nice.
sometimes it's they more common they you know they sell tickets to these events, and they just split the revenue between the performers and the bar. It's the usual kind of thing. So I mean, I would do it for free. So, but I'm not going to say no to money, obviously.
So now you said you're writing the music. So when you write the music and then you perform it, do you record it? Do you save it? What you've created?
I haven't been. I do um I will do what's called like you know sort of like a master recording, a 2-track. So I just is it, a proper recording when they record music is, you know, they record everything separately. All the instruments are separated, and then it's recorded, and then they mix it, and then whatever. There's a whole process to it, and I don't enjoy that very much, which is a little unusual because I used to do that for a living. You know, I was a sound engineer in Toronto, and that was post production was my career for a while. Um, but I don't like it. I will do a live. I try to do a live recording of everything. So like, which means like I play through and I do everything live, and then I have a you know final 2-track mix. And I don't do any editing or whatever, and that's just the way it is.
Right.
But recently, I think because I've been a little more active this year performing, and recently people have been asking me like, you know, do you have anything? Is there something we can look at? So I plan to this year do some proper formal recording at some point. But it's not as much fun as writing and performing. So
That's cool. So let's just say, would it work what you do? Let's just say that there was a band somewhere and they said, hey, we're looking for somebody to add some different kind of music to our performances. Like, is that something that would work?
Yeah, I mean it's an instrument like anything else. So it's there was an event in Shanghai last month. It was really quite nice actually. It was a Sunday afternoon, which is a nice change from having to play, you know, at midnight or 1 a.m. or something. And it was it was called jazz. I can't remember the name of the event, but it was the idea behind the event was jazz musicians and electronic musicians, like synthesizer musicians, playing together. So there was I brought my stuff. There was another guy who brought a lot of more traditional synthesizers, and another guy who was I think he has a jazz background in piano, but he has, you know, he couldn't bring a piano, so he had a, you know, electronic keyboard, and a bass player, and a couple saxophone players, and a jazz guitar player, and yeah, it was just like an all afternoon thing. So everybody had a time to perform their own sort of solo piece, which was about 10 or 15 minutes each. But then the way the event was organized was they just mixed us together. So it would be like, okay, you play for 10 minutes together, and then one person drops out and another person drops in, and then another, you know, so I'd be playing with the other synth guy, and then the other synth guy would stop playing and the bass player would join. Then I would stop playing and then the saxophone player would join. So we just sort of rotated through these different configurations. And then, you know, I think because we're all musicians, they had this plan of having it very organized. But then, you know, people would, you just be inspired, you know, you'd hear what the other people were playing, be like, oh yeah, okay, I'm going to jump in. And, you know, so it got chaotic, but in a kind of fun way, people sort of coming out. So yeah, absolutely. There's no, I have no trouble personally. I have no trouble playing with other musicians.
Cool. Like one of the things that I was thinking about, like I know some musicians who don't live anywhere near each other, but they meet online, and
Yeah.
they perform online together, or they practice together, or stuff like that. It's really quite interesting how the world has changed when it comes to stuff like that, right? I mean, you don't have to be, meeting in a garage group of people, somebody's garage anymore to do all of these things, right? So it's kind of
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I think it's great that people do that. For me personally, one of the things I'm most interested in when it comes to music is the kind of ephemeral nature of it. So when you do a performance,
yeah.
it's a thing that exists in that time, in that place, amongst those people. And then even if you record it, like the recording might be very good, but the recording is a different thing than the thing that happened. And the physical space you're in, and the people that are there, they all sort of contribute to
Okay. That what's
musical
happening at
event.
that time. It's not something you rehearsed or whatever, right?
Because I have worked with people over the years where we pass things back and forth. So if you work with music software, you have like a project file. So it's, you start, somebody writes something and then you send it to somebody else and they add something to it and they send it to somebody else and they add something to it. And that's fun. It's enjoyable, but it's a different kind of experience than what can take place in a live environment. And that's personally, that's what I think. Everything's great. It's all like people that do recordings, people that do online performances, where like remote performance, that's all fantastic. But for me personally, I'm just interested in that sort of ephemeral experience of this thing that happened.
Sorry, we're just getting a notice that we're going to run out of time soon.
Oh, okay.
Zoom gives me a certain amount of time. That's for the free. That's for the free app. I'm not paying for it because I don't get paid.
Okay.
Why would I pay for that?
Well, sorry I wasted so much time trying to get the connections to work.
Listen, it's all good. It's not wasted time. I mean, this is all creative space, right? It's like when you're talking about what you do when you go to a performance and your first one, you weren't prepared because you weren't expecting and it wasn't good, but it's all part of the experience anyway, right? It's
very
not
true.
That. So do you think, I'm just going to ask a couple more questions before I shut down. Do you think that community of the groups are getting larger for that type of music?
That's a tough question. No, I don't think. I think that maybe a little bit, but not. I think there was kind of a big growth over the last 3 years, but I think it's slowed down a little bit recently. It's not. It's an expensive hobby, and I think in general, I think music can be for anybody, like any instrument.
Yeah.
So I think there was this sort of period where more people were learning about it, and it grew a bit. But I think right now, no, not too much. It might in the future. I think people are looking for more focused, because it's easy to get distracted by buying more equipment, and then people tend to lose focus. So they not everybody uses their equipment to make music all the time, and so I think there's a lot of innovation going on. Some of the designers that are building modules do some very creative things with electronic circuits, and that people continue to sort of innovate in that area. But no, I don't think there's a huge growth right now.
Okay. So. Well, on that downer.
But no, I think that's fine. I mean, the history of this particular kind of music, I mean, there was the first modular synthesizer that I know of was built by a company called Moog. And there was a couple people, there was a company called Buchla and then Surge and Moog that were building these modular synthesizers in the 60s and 70s. And they were very, very expensive. They're great machines, but they're very, very expensive.
Yeah.
Then the market crashed completely. I mean, all the companies more or less went out of business or stopped producing these things. Yeah. And during that time, there was about a 15-year period, maybe 10, 15 years, where these were not being manufactured commercially. Yeah. During that time, what you had were these, I think it was a fairly small network, but there was a kind of network of people, of electronics, DIY people, that just for fun, as a hobby, were trying to recreate these circuits, sort of rebuild them, just by listening to them or searching for schematics where they could. And then, they just sort of kept it alive because they loved it. And all those people are still around now. And later on, when it sort of got reborn, the work that they had been doing, just for fun as a hobby, sort of fed back into and helped the sort of the small industry grow. So it's okay. I mean, for me, if all these companies went out of business tomorrow, I'd be sad because I think they're great, but it wouldn't stop me. And I can still build electronics on my own, and I would continue to do that. For me, this is the best way to interface with sound to sort of
Very nice.
manipulate.
Now, that's a good place to end it, because I don't want that. See, Zoom will just shut us down without even any more notice. So anyway, I just want to the audience, thank you very much. You've been listening to my son, Andrew Scott Brown, who lives in Shanghai, as I said, and hopefully he'll get a chance. He was going to come home for a visit, but that COVID hit. But hopefully soon they'll be able to do that. And anyway, thank you everybody for watching the show. Take care. And oh yeah, subscribe. That's always nice. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
A sense of community, Chilliwack's a place to be. A sense of community when you're free. Rolling through the mountains, rolling through the valley, rolling through paradise with me. It's multicultural, you're sure to see it all. Chilliwack's the place to be, you'll see. Come party in the park, go dancing after dark. Chilliwack's the place to be, you'll see.